Sponsored by Suzuki.
On the east coast of Ireland, less than 15 miles from Dublin city centre, lies the seaside town of Bray in County Wicklow. Prominent on the town hall, in the centre of Bray's main street, is the crest of the Brabazon family. The Brabazons' association with Bray dates back to 1618, when Edward Brabazon, later 1st Earl of Meath, was granted 20,000 acres in North Wicklow, including Killruddery House. Today, almost 400 years later, Killruddery is still home to the Brabazon family, specifically to the 15th Earl of Meath, Jack, and his wife Zania. The present house is considered by many to be one of the most successful Elizabethan revival mansions in Ireland. It is also one of the earliest, having been started in 1820 by William and Richard Morrison for the 10th Earl.
Killruddery is a truly enchanting place. From the first moment one turns onto the drive leading to the house, one can start to forget the seemingly never-ending spread of industrial and residential development that characterises so much of North Wicklow. Instead, Killruddery is an oasis of calm in the midst of chaos, and I'm really looking forward to bathing in the tranquil balm of its atmosphere.
David, good morning. You're very welcome to Killruddery.
Thank you very much, Alva.
Let's go inside.
And what a nice greeting. Greeted not by a butler, but by a boucle.
Killruddery House and Gardens are open to the public, and anyone who has visited there will undoubtedly have met with Alva de Butler, who has been administrator of the estate for the past 15 years.
I came to Killruddery in 1986 when I left. I had worked in Powerscourt previously for some time as tourism manager, and I was approached by Lord Meath then to take on the job of administering the house and gardens here for him, which I found extremely attractive because it's a place of great interest. It's very local to me. I live very close by, and it was nice to be involved in a house that had a family living in it.
The previous Lord and Lady Meath ran the Killruddery estate for almost 50 years. But since the late Lord Meath's death, it has passed to their eldest son Jack and his wife Zania, who have only recently taken up residence here.
David, I'd like you to meet Lord and Lady Meath, David Norris.
Good morning, lovely to meet you.
Hello.
Good morning.
Very welcome.
What a lovely Wicklow morning we have for us too. At the house.
The changeover wasn't that huge because I knew the present Earl and his wife anyway. So it's a different era, and it's the next generation taking on. And this happens, and this is the beauty of having a house with a family, that the next generation is there to carry on the custodianship of the property. I mean, they're only the stewards for the time being, and then it goes on to the next generation. So I'm delighted that the next generation have come and that they are actually living here now.
I think really, if you take on something like this, you've got to actually live in it. I know you can rent it, you can do all sorts of things, but I think really it needs to be lived in constantly. It's a lovely thing to own, and one hopes to do one's best with it, but it's a challenge as to how one really keeps it in good shape and makes money in order to keep it in good shape.
Right, here we are in the front courtyard. We'll turn around and look at the house. And what you see here is not the house that was here in 1820.
Yes, there is a slightly strange feel to it, isn't there? As if it hadn't always been quite revealed like that.
No, it hadn't, and certainly that bit on the right there, which is all new.
The house that the present Lord and Lady Meath inherited is quite different to the original design of 1820. When the previous Lord and Lady Meath inherited in 1947, they discovered that the house was suffering from a savage infestation of dry rot. They were faced with the dreadful prospect of having to demolish a substantial portion of the house in order to save the rest. In 1952, the work began. Builders painstakingly dismantled the wonderful old facade, numbering each brick as they went. They removed the damaged sections and rebuilt a new and more modest entrance. The project took 10 years.
What was lost? Were any of the great rooms lost?
There was a huge dining room on this wing here, which faced towards the rock, and the kitchens were in the west wing there. And because when the big entrance, you came up onto the first floor, everything, all the servants' passages and everything, all the service was all under the first floor.
So the servants would come scuttling along the corridors, trying to keep the food warm before it got to the dining room. Isn't that right?
Precisely. And the souffle, if there was a souffle, there was quite a performance with a souffle that had to go from the west wing right up to the dining room.
Of course, because you'd have to make sure the souffle wasn't flat by the time it got in. Otherwise,
Precisely.
there might be trouble. Yes.
Precisely. Claude Phillimore was the architect who helped my father-in-law redesign the front entrance.
Well, he certainly did it very much in sympathy with the whole feeling of the house, which is remarkable when you think of the drastic nature of all the changes.
It must have been a bit of a mess, mustn't
Yeah.
it? When they pulled it all down, wondering how they were going to put it back.
Though the entrance hall and dining room were lost, the architects were able to salvage substantial elements of the 19th century rooms, and even one section from the original 17th century house.
Here we are in the library. This is the oldest room in the house, the only remaining part of the 17th century house.
So it's a Jacobean room, really.
A Jacobean room, and the plasterwork is much more simple than the plasterwork you'll see later on.
And good King Charles. Lots of wonderful pictures.
Yes.
Well, as a bibliophile, I have to say, I know it's wrong, but I covet that bookcase. I really do.
Well, the bookcases in this room are all Chippendale.
Oh, they're Chippendale. No wonder I like them. And the contents are just wonderful. I mean, the bindings on the records of the Irish House of Commons during the end of the 18th century, Grattan's Parliament, beautifully worked Irish bindings, and how sadly we've declined into our little pamphlets from Shanadairn. Not quite the same.
The library windows afford an excellent view of one of Killruddery Estate's most celebrated features, the Long Ponds. These two 550-foot ponds, or miroirs d'eau, have no counterpart in Ireland or the United Kingdom.
I've never seen this kind of water feature, as they'd say in the garden centres.
No, well, the house is compared to the Chateau of Courance, which is about 50 kilometres south of Paris, and is owned by the Marquise and the Marquise de Gannet.
And they have the same arrangement?
They have 12 of them.
12 of them? Is that a bit excessive?
Well, it did make us feel more humble, I must say, that we only could have 2.
But I'm sure that was very good for the soul, and it balances all the servants scuttling underneath with their soufflés.
So here we are in the drawing room, and this is the 1820 house now. We're now in the 19th century.
Yes, it has a 19th century feeling, but it has elegance and comfort, which were the two Victorian virtues. Well, now, Hawkeye Norris strikes again, I think, on this wonderful blue pot I found, Killruddery. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It is the house. Desmond Fitzgerald spotted this a few years back now.
Yes.
And it was in an antique shop in Dublin. And he saw it and he rang up and he said, I've seen this pot with Killruddery on it. You've got to acquire this. You've got to acquire this.
But that'd be Desmond to insist this is the place it must be.
Absolutely.
And I think he's absolutely
and it's
right.
on both sides too.
Yes.
There's another picture on the other side.
How wonderful.
So it's a recent acquisition.
Yes. But a very appropriate one.
I hope so.
I'm greatly taken by that lovely mirror with the suggestion of grapes and drinking.
It's rather fun, isn't it? That mirror was brought by the late Lord Meath's mother from Dunraven Castle in Wales. And it's a 19th century copy of an earlier design attributed to Thomas Johnson. It's rather fun. It depicts the grape harvest.
Yeah.
You see the god Bacchus at the top.
Oh, yes, I do.
And the cherubs busy harvesting the grapes.
Yeah.
But I rather love the fox at the bottom there.
Yes, looking up longingly and hoping that some grapes are a drink, and the little cherubs are trampling the grapes.
I actually have seen a carved wooden one exactly the same in the Knickerbocker Club in New York.
That's why
And
I
wondered if that was
Yes.
an original.
I wonder, well, I've stayed there, and of course it's full of Irish people, you know, so I go in and gossip there, and that's why the mirror looked familiar.
Life in the big house now is very different to 50 years ago, when there would have been as many as 30 indoor staff working here. One of the women who remembers this time well is Mae Crinnion, who came to Killruddery in 1927, when she was just 16 years old.
There was 4 housemaids, and I was the 4th one. And there was 3 or 4 people in the pantry. There was a butler and 2 footmen and a hall boy. And there was a lady's maid and governess then. And there was quite a big staff. Killruddery was ablaze with parties, glittering parties, for all the different things that were happening in Ireland, for hunting season and racing season and all that. They entertained all the friends for those special occasions. We used to go up on there was a balcony. We used to go up on the balcony and see them going into dinner and that. It was lovely. Glittering parties, really.
The parties at Killruddery today are likely to be considerably more staged affairs and provide a key source of funding for the upkeep of the estate.
341, take 1.
Killruddery is terribly popular for locations for films because of its proximity to Ardmore, for one, because it's got a period house, because it's got a very large garden. It is overwhelming because you suddenly have anything up to maybe 300 people, depending on the size of the film, in with trucks, generators, quads, horses, people, caravans, everything in on top of you. And then you have miles and miles of electric cable running through the house. You have windows being opened and doors being left open, and it's complete and total disruption. We had a director of a film which would be nameless coming in. He was American, chewing the inevitable gum. By the way, Tom Cruise, when he was here, always chewed green gum. I think that was in deference to the country. And this director walked into the library, which is the oldest part of the house, looked at the window, looked at me and said, does this window open? And I said, no, it doesn't. And he said, well, how about smashing the glass? So he was talking about original 19th century glass. So I said, I don't think so.
The recently restored conservatory, or orangery, at Killruddery is a popular venue for local events and is one of the locations of the annual Festival of Music in Great Irish Houses.
Here we are now in the orangery, designed by William Byrne and built onto the house in 1852.
And did they ever grow oranges in it?
I believe it was the Victorian days. It was heated, and they had a lot of tropical plants and things like that.
And maybe a vine or two for
Yes.
grapes.
This was built after the fashion of the Crystal Palace in London, and everybody wanted their own orangery. And the story goes that Harriet, who was the wife of the 11th Earl, also wanted her orange. And there's no money, can't afford it. And the story goes that the family tiara was sold, or a family tiara was sold, there may have been more than one in those days, to pay for this. And that the granite crenellations around the exterior of the orangery are actually a copy of the tiara.
What a wonderful story. And I have to say, I think a bargain. I mean, given a choice between a tiara and this orangery, I'd take the orangery any day, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. It's my favourite room because it has so many uses. When the children were very small, we had birthday parties in here. And then after the event, we took the hosepipe and then washed the ice cream and jelly down the gratings here.
Wonderfully practical.
It's also the venue of the music festival in Great Irish Houses. Yes. We have many receptions here, and I'm glad to say that the local Bray people also use it for receptions. It was used in the Bray Festival for a poetry reading evening and also to launch their festival.
Yes, I think I read about that, and it's now weatherproof, which is a great relief.
Yes, I think Mr. Turner might turn in his grave, really, because it's not glass any longer. But my father-in-law did cover it in the 1970s, but there was no plastics then that were UV resistant.
Yes.
And it became brittle and very hard, so such as an extent that when we had Ashkenazi playing here, it rained on his piano.
He should have played the Raindrop Prelude by Chopin.
He did think of it, but actually it was raining so hard that nobody could hear it anyway. And it was very unfortunate that it happened to rain at 8:20 that evening. But since then, we've done this big restoration project, and we have now used plastics which are Hosta glass and are UV resistant. So we're hoping to get a few generations out of it now.
Yes, well, it looks to me very much as if you will.
Lord and Lady Meath have 3 children. Their only son, Anthony, automatically inherited the title of Lord RD and grew up at Killruddery.
Oh, the childhood here was fantastic mainly because of the family. There were 11 cousins, first cousins, all within 2 or 3 years of each other, living within a mile. And, we'd all be chucked together so one parent could look after us and the rest could go away, and then it would be complete mayhem. So you just run riot around the house and, knock over nice vases and get shouted at and jump in the ponds, fall in the ponds usually. Mess around in the hay bales on the farm, run around the attics, pull out all the old trunks and all the old costumes and put them on. And, it was fantastic. It was a really good childhood. Well, Killruddery Estate is sort of divided into 2 bits. There's the house and the gardens, which are open to the public. And then there's the farm, which has cows, sheep, and arable land as well. I'm a freelance computer animator, so I do that. That actually earns money, which is probably the first. I'm probably the first Lord RD who's ever earned money, not from farming. So that's always a good thing. Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty close to Killruddery and pretty close to me, but the big danger is you do spend your time in here and you don't actually get out into the real world very much. So I intend to, get on with it rather than sort of become it or it become me.
Steps.
The significance of the gardens at Killruddery cannot be overstated. Their ambitious, formal layout was described in an article for Country Life as not only the most poetic, as well as the most extensive pre-naturalistic design in Ireland, but among the most important gardens of their type in these islands.
We've got lawns, hedges and water, I suppose.
Yes.
They're the 3 sort of
essential elements.
Well, that's sort of steps just going out and looking out there. And then on our left we've got a statue which is made of zinc alloy, and that's from Potsdam, Kale of Dotsdam. And that's the dying gladiator.
Oh, yeah.
Australia, New
Is
Zealand.
it?
They're very important timber trees,
Yes.
but they're almost extinct.
There are over 90 acres of gardens on the Killruddery estate, and they are managed by Dara Farren, who has just recently taken up the position of head gardener.
People quite often come up and say they can think of worse places to work and various other things like that. It is a nice place to work, especially when you come in early in the morning, it's a nice day. You know, you do feel you're pretty lucky to be working in a place like this. The main thing about these gardens is that they're unique. They're the only intact 17th century gardens. They're not a flowery garden. They're about structure, you know, views. There's parts of the garden that are very secluded. The angles is, you know, very secluded. The bowling green has a it has an eeriness about it. There's other parts like behind me where, you know, there's the water and the flowers, the birds singing and all the rest. So there's lots of different aspects to the garden. You know, there's a different charm to, you know, recommend each area of it really. You know.
There are 3.5 miles of hedging and acres of grassland on the estate. Maintenance of these is contracted out to a local firm, which leaves Dara free to concentrate on the rejuvenation of sections of the formal gardens. His first job was to tackle the sunken garden in front of the orangery, and in particular the box hedging.
Along here is a fairly good example of what we had to do with the box hedge. It was a matter of taking the outside third off the hedge the whole way around. It's a 3-stage process. The idea then is that with the outside third gone, that'll have time to recover somewhat before I take the top third off, and then that will recover, and then I will take the inside third off, and the end result should be a small, compact, symmetrical hedge. I do feel quite lucky to be here. I'm 29, so it might be, some might find it to be a little bit young, but it allows me to sort of take a long-term view of what needs to be done here. I worked in a private estate directly before getting this job, so I think I had picked up some good experience, and as I say, it does allow me to take a fairly long-term view of the place and you know, plan long-term.
We're now coming to the Angles, which is a lovely tranquil place.
Together with the Long Ponds, the Sylvan Theatre and the Beach Hedge Pond, the Angles were laid out in 1682 by Philippe Bonnet. They comprise a series of isosceles triangles centering on 2 clearings. The hedges are a combination of hornbeam, beech and lime.
Well, we've had a lovely walk about, and we have a sense of the gardens and the house at the centre of its own little world. But I wonder, with the amount of work and commitment that you and your family have given to the place, do you ever really get time to relax, sit down and enjoy it?
We try our best to actually make time to enjoy it and to relax, because otherwise it's sort of
pointless.
It's slightly pointless.
Yeah. And do you have a favourite bit? You know, it's very difficult to choose, but I mean, is there a place which you would plump for and say, this is my priority, I love this? I have a feeling I know.
Well, there's a lot of work to do in the woodland gardens, which are suffering from wind blow and too much undergrowth, and we need to develop that sector and plant a different variety of trees, I think. But I think the Angles are my favourite, really.
I knew you'd come to the Angles. And it is wonderful because it's so unusual, to me at least.
I think that the Angles in June, mid-June, when the lime trees are flowering, there's a fantastic sort of smell. And,
yes, I know the smell of lime trees. Untitled and linden.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that is my favourite.
Much credit for the preservation of these historic gardens must go to the previous owners, and specifically Elizabeth, Countess of Meath.
It's been possible to think of Killruddery House and Gardens without bringing to mind Elizabeth, Countess of Meath, who has made such a contribution, along with her late husband, to the upkeep of Killruddery. When they came back after the war, the gardens were, I'm told, a complete mess. They were overgrown, there were weeds everywhere, briars, nettles, and they both went at it with such vigour. And here you have the result today. The Countess has a rather good sense of humour, and I know she told me a story where she and Lord Meath were going to a party at the British Embassy over in Sandyford, and the next day I asked her how was the party. So she said, well, they had to queue for quite a long time. There were a lot of people going in, and they had to present their invitation. And the guard, a young guard, looked at the invitation, looked at them both in the car and said, geez, I didn't think there were any of your lot left anymore. So she looked at them and said, we're very old and genuine antiques. So, I mean, when you think of the guards saying people like these around anymore, if we didn't have people like Lord and Lady Meath, you wouldn't have Killruddery.
Tales from the Big House, sponsored by Suzuki.